contamination or cross-contamination. So Module 2 talked about the safety regulations, the bodies that are involved in safety, that regulate safety. We have a lot of them, the Nigerian Biosafety Society and a host of others. So Module 3 talked about facility. Okay, sorry about that. I think I went off for a while. I don't know what happened. So I'm sharing my slide. Can you all see my slide now? Hello? Hello, guys? Hello?
I can hear you. Please don't go ahead.
Oh, all right. So I was talking about the course module and introduction, how we've been taking through introduction to safety, as well as safety regulations. I was talking about the regulation bodies in Nigeria that has actually helped keep the environment, our facilities safe, that ensure that environments and environmental conditions are safe for use. Then Module 3 talked about facility and housekeeping safety, which talks about how we keep our environment, our facility, our workspace, and also the general upkeep of our laboratory to avoid disorganization, to avoid cross-contamination, and avoid us from infecting others. So today we'll be talking about laboratory safety and classification. Laboratory safety and classification talks about the biohazard safety cabinet and other classifications of laboratory safety. So we'll be talking about some terminologies in which we are familiar with: hazardous waste, healthcare general waste, healthcare risk waste. So we say hazardous waste are waste that can, by circumstances of use, concentration, or inherent physical, chemical, or toxicological characteristics, have significant adverse effects. So hazardous waste are waste that can have adverse effect on the public health, on individual, on the environment, when they are improperly treated, when they are improperly transported, or they are disposed carelessly. So examples of hazardous waste that you can find are about chemical waste, waste from the laboratory, generated from the laboratory, waste that are contained, genetically modified organisms that are carelessly kept, and when they are not treated properly, or they are not transported or kept in an enclosed environment, or when they are discarded improperly, so they can cause, they are classified as hazardous waste, and they can have serious and adverse effects on the public health. So we talked about healthcare general waste. Healthcare general waste is a portion of waste that poses a little of risk, a little of minimal risk to human health and also the environment. And this healthcare general waste are just our basic waste that we use in the laboratory: paper, pen, what we eat in our laundry, in our lounge, our eating area, what the builders use, just basic general waste that we use in the laboratory that are not laboratory contaminated. So those are healthcare general waste. The garden waste, your bottle of Coke, your bottle of Fanta, your food that you ate, probably the clean area, the papers, your pen. So those are healthcare general waste, and they pose minimal or little risk to the human health. So healthcare, we then go to healthcare risk waste. Healthcare risk waste are simply our anatomical waste, infectious waste from human, our blood samples, our urine, our fecal samples, our tissue, human tissue that are used in the laboratory. And these must be properly disposed. Our pharmaceutical waste, radioactive waste, our syringe, whatever waste we use in the lab that are generated in the laboratory and generated by the healthcare professional and non-healthcare professionals also, they generate this kind of waste. You know, it's not only the hospital or the healthcare facility that use needle and syringe, even those that draw design tattoos, they use sharp objects and they discard. And when they do not properly discard them, they cause danger to the environment or to the public health space. And these are termed as healthcare risk waste. So we also talk of waste management. Waste management simply refers to the administrative process involved in handling, treatment, storage and disposal of waste. And this has to do with how waste are being generated, how they are disposed in the waste bin, then how they are being transported from the laboratory to where they are going to be finally disposed or discarded or incinerated. So the storage, if they are the ones that has to be stored for over a period of time, your blood sample, your anatomical waste. So the waste management has to involve the processes and operational and administrative processes involved in handling this waste, healthcare waste in totality. So we talked about anatomical waste just now. Already we've explained what anatomical waste or pathological waste are. Pathological or anatomical waste are waste that are gotten from human specimen, tissues, organs, blood and body fluid, fetus, and for those in the research lab, the human specimens used for your research, your carcass, your rats, rabbit, your mice. So you know when after you're done with the usage, how you dispose them. So they are termed as anatomical waste, and they also exclude teeth and hair. Teeth and hair they are called subcategories of infectious waste, but they are not called anatomical waste because they do not decompose and they cannot be decomposed. So they are a subcategory of infectious waste and not called anatomical waste. So infectious non-anatomical wastes are wastes that are contained or suspected to contain pathogens, viruses, bacterial parasites, or fungi in sufficient concentration. Infectious non-anatomical waste are non-human waste, are not human waste that contains a significant amount of bacteria or pathogens that can cause harm to host, to even the environment. So we talk about waste generation, which are these are part of the terminologies in laboratory safety. Waste generation generators rather involves a facility, individual, or an organization that engage in generating waste. So major parts of waste generators are those that work in the healthcare facility. They generate a huge amount of waste. Those that work in the food industry, your eateries, they generate a huge amount of waste. And so these are termed as waste generators. And individuals too, every organization, every corporate organization are potential waste generators because they utilize a lot of documents, papers, materials for their day-to-day activity. And after usage, they get to dispose of these materials. And these materials, after usage, are termed as waste. So an organization or a facility or any person that generates waste are termed as waste generators. So we have another class, another terminology called sharps. Sharps are sharp objects that are used and after used are discarded. They are waste too. So and a major organization or facility or department that generates a huge amount of waste from sharps are usually the healthcare facility, because they generate needles, syringe, lead, clinical for those surgical materials used for surgeries, glass pipettes, and a huge loads of others. So these are sharp objects, and they are capable of causing injury, punctures, or wound to an individual or the society. And so after use, they should be discarded properly, and they are termed as waste. So disinfectants are chemicals that are used to kill, inhibit, or prevent the growth of infectious agents on inanimate objects. So disinfectants are what we use, are chemicals, and a major disinfectant that are mostly used by healthcare professionals are usually the 1% hypochlorites, your jig, so many. We have disinfectants. Your your soap, your hand wash. These are disinfectants you use in disinfecting an environment. And these disinfectants have different levels, different classes. The ones that kill the organism or the infectious growth on the inanimate object completely, and the ones that kills it partially. So we have containers. Containers are disposable vessels or bags that are used to handle waste, in which waste are placed for transportation, storage, or eventual disposal. So we have a lot of containers. We have different types. The classification of containers used to discard waste. We have the red nylon, the red, the yellow, the black, and white, and they are used for various types of disposal of waste. The black cannot be used to handle anatomical waste. The red should not be used to handle general waste, and vice versa. So each of these nylons, they have color codes, and these color codes are really taken very seriously by waste organizations, waste agencies who handle or treat waste for potential use, because they all have their individual strengths in handling this waste capacity. So we have non-reusable sharp containers. These are containers designated to be filled to its capacity once only and then destroyed. An example of non-reusable sharp containers are our syringe. You use them once. Injection, then our drip needles. These are sharp containers or sharp objects which must be used once and after which destroyed, and then they are termed as waste. Then we have biociders. Biociders are also chemicals that are used to kill living organisms. They are used to kill living organisms. We have decontamination. Decontamination means is to eliminate danger of infection for unprotected persons. So an example of decontamination is when you are in a laboratory or a facility where there's potential hazard. When you are coming out, you have to decontaminate yourself. So decontamination is just to eliminate dangers of infection for people who are unprotected, for an environment that is unprotected. Spirociders are chemicals used to kill spores, fungi, and bacteria. Example of spores forming organisms are fungi and bacteria. They have spores are very thick layers, and ordinary chemicals or ordinary disinfectant may not be capable to kill them. So spirocidal agents are used in place of ordinary disinfectants to kill these spores. So we have germicides. Germicides are used to kill vegetative bacteria, and we have bacteriostatics. which inhibit growth of organisms but don't necessarily kill them. So classification of clinical laboratory, we have the basic laboratory, we have biosafety level 1, basic laboratory biosafety 2, the containment laboratory biosafety 3, and the maximum containment biosafety. So the purpose of biosafety is to protect the laboratory personnel and the environment from pathogenic microorganisms, such as aerosols, which might be formed during the process of these organisms when you are processing organisms. So the primary purpose of our biosafety or clinical laboratory biosafety environment is to protect personnel and also the environment. So biosafeties of clinical laboratories are divided into 4 classes: the level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 1 biosafety cabinets are usually to protect the environment. They are usually used to protect the environment and not the organisms. An example of that is your centrifuge. It's just an example, typical example of your biosafety 1, bio-level safety 1. Then bio-level safety 2, it can be used to protect both the environment, the personnel, and the organisms from contamination. The higher classes of biosafeties, and they are usually used to contain medium to high risk organisms from moving out of the environment or from the laboratory space. Then the containment laboratory biosafety level 3 is a higher form of biosafety level 3, biosafety level, which is usually used to contain high-risk organisms to protect the individual, the personnel, the laboratory environments, as well as the organism itself. So biosafety 2 and 3 are usually used interchangeably. Then the maximum containment level biosafety 4 is the highest form of biosafety, which are most suitably used for hazardous agents. They are the highest class and must be used in a very, very secured environment. An example of facilities that use the biosafety 4 are usually research facilities, the CDC, the NCDCs. These are the facilities that use this high class of biosafety for work. Note this about the clinical laboratory: it is only authorized personnel that are allowed to enter a laboratory workspace, only laboratory. And when you visit a laboratory, there are signs that you get to see, and these signs must strictly be adhered to. They are not there for fancy, but to guide you so that you don't get to infect yourself or infect yourself, as well as spread this infection to the public health. So we see authorized personnel should only be allowed into laboratory work environments. Laboratory doors are usually kept closed when working, so contain the space and to keep those who are unprotected or who are not specialists or laboratory personnel from infecting themselves. Children are not allowed or are not authorized to enter the laboratory work environment. This is because we know how children are and how they are, how they play around. So they are not, and it should be ensured that they are not authorized to enter a laboratory working area so that they avoid contamination of themselves and also personnel around them. So access to animal house should be specially authorized for research facilities who deal with animals for a research purpose. You know, our animals are a bit fragile compared to human, so authorized personnel should be authorized personnel must be the only people who enters this animal house, because they generate a lot of hazardous substance that causes public health damage. So access to animal house should be specially authorized. No animal should be admitted other than those involved in the work of the laboratory. So animals who are always used for research purpose should be specifically kept separate from animals that are not used. You don't bring in any animals in anyhow into research facility for research purpose. You specially choose your research breed of animals, and any other animal should not be allowed to enter the workspace. So biohazard warning signs of laboratory doors are always kept at every entrance of the laboratory of any healthcare facility. An example of that are what we are seeing on our screen. The biohazard level safety 2, you see authorized personnel, then you see warning biohazard. So these are signs, and these signs and many more are always used to avoid unwanted personnel or unauthorized personnel from entering a safe containment area. Are we following? Hello, guys.
Yes, we are. We are following.
All right, thank you. So we talked about premises and housekeeping. So we know that in our module 3, we talked about housekeeping, our general housekeeping. Housekeeping, it's a very important part of laboratory safety and healthcare safety, because a disorganized environment is a potential risk to cause hazard. I hope we are aware of that. A disorganized environment, anybody can just come in. An environment that is disorganized, a laboratory that is disorganized, that is not so organized, is a potential risk for infection. So it is very important and pertinent that our premises, our workspace, our environment, our laboratory must be kept in order. Premises must be kept clean always in good state of repair. When there are repairs to be made, they should be done adequately and appropriately, because the laboratory is a collection of so many networks where you generate not about chemical waste, you generate infectious waste, you generate even, you are exposed to even electrical hazard. So it must be kept in a good condition, and when there is repair to be made, repair should be done urgently, because a whole lot of accidents, infection can occur in the laboratory. Loose and broken ties must always be repaired. Why? Because to avoid accidents, to avoid slipping, and to avoid injury of personnel, laboratory personnel, and authorized personnel. And this, in turn, affects workflow of the organization. It is important that all aisles and corridors are kept free from obstacle. Why is this so? This is so because in a case of emergency and people are moving out or running out, they should be able to walk freely, and the lab and whatsoever personnel that is coming into the lab should not be jumping from one obstacle to another. Before you know, he's jumping nylon on the floor. Before you know, he's jumping reagent carton. Before you know, he's jumping equipment just to move from point A to point B. No, that is not how your premises or your facility or your laboratory space should be. Your laboratory space must be wide and free from obstacles. Good ambience that is customer friendly. A good environment must have a good space that is customer friendly, must have a good space that does not cause, that does not produce foul smell, foul odor. You know, for those of us that work in the microbiology unit, we know that the microbiology unit generates a lot of aerosols and airspace contamination. So imagine a customer walking in, and the next thing is perceiving the smell of agar plates, either your blood agar or even fecal sample that you are processing. No, your space, your laboratory space must be well aerated, must have good spacing and good ventilation that can be contained within its space. So ventilation, we just spoke about ventilation. The windows have to be open. They need to be open. They need to be able to be opened and closed easily. They have to, there's this flexible and not that you're struggling. When you want to open your window, you're struggling to open. When you need fresh air, you're struggling to open, or you want to close, somebody will have to go through the back to hold the to push the window. No, your window should not be like that. Your doors even so, where practicals occur. So air conditioning system and extraction fan is a very good indicator of ventilation in a laboratory, a research facility, or a healthcare space. And there should be 24 hours air condition and extraction fan to actually keep your environment Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Hello, can hear you.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much. Sorry for the breaking transmission. So we're talking about floor. So I said the floor. Hold on, let me share my screen. Just a minute, please. All right. Sorry for that breaking transmission. Let me share the screen now. Can you see the screen now?
yes.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry for the breaking transmission. So I was talking about ventilation, where we talked about windows that need to be open and they should be flexible to open and close easily. And also it is very good to have an air conditioning system and also extraction fan that helps to keep the place well ventilated. And the filters of these ACs and extraction fan should always be clean and always serviced every 3 to 6 months, depending on how frequent they are being used. And this must be documented regularly. So, our air conditioning system, they have to be serviced at every interval and every time. Also, our extraction fan. And this extraction fan are used to actually keep the place well ventilated, remove unwanted air, and replace with well aerated air system. So these two important system ventilation are very important for a laboratory, a healthcare workspace, as well as any organization that deals with safety. So the floors and wall. So the floors and wall must regularly be clean. The floor has to be very, very clean, free from grease. They have to be free from spillage so that they cannot cause accidents. When your floor is slippery, it's a problem, and that can cause a serious damage, a serious accident. Your tiles must regularly be vacuumed and securely fastened so as not to result in trips and fall. We just said that the floors have to be very free from slip. They have to be very friction free. They have to have good friction with anybody walking on the surface, and they have to be vacuumed regularly. Your floor and walls must be clean and tidy. We just said that. Your walkway must be clear and defined and free from obstacles, just as we said. Your wall paint, your wall paint must be in good condition. A laboratory or a healthcare facility must have good wall painting system. Not that a client is visiting your facility and the next thing is seeing an old beaten, dilapidated building with the wall, with all the painting on the wall almost finished. Is seeing white instead of blue, and dirty environment. It does not tell well of a good laboratory or a good healthcare facility. So your carpets are not allowed in the laboratory space where sample handling and processing takes place. It is not good to use carpet because they are very slippery and not good for use. The flooring for laboratory areas where sample handling and processing takes place must be of materials that allow easy cleaning and disinfecting. So you see, a carpet being used in an area where samples are processed. Imagine you want to disinfect, you cannot pour jig on it. It will spoil the carpet, and that can in turn cause injury. So the flooring must be tiled, well tiled, and it must be of a material that allows for easy disinfecting and cleaning. You must be able to clean the sample handling process regularly. You should clean them and disinfect them regularly. So lighting and electricity, we almost agree that lighting is a very important factor or important part of any healthcare facility, any research facility, and any laboratory, because good lighting must and aids in our work as personnel, because we deal with organisms, microorganisms, and for the healthcare space, the doctors in surgical units, they deal with humans, opening of humans. So they need good lighting for them to be able to see what they are doing. And as a laboratory personnel, you need good lighting to be able to view your space, ensure your workspace is not dull, so that you can be able to see your work properly. So faulty light bulbs must be replaced regularly. Do not stack anything in front of window so that the natural lighting is not obstructed. It is very important that your window should not be overloaded with materials or equipment that they block ventilation or natural lighting. They have to be natural lighting. So artificial lighting should be positioned in such a way that they provide sufficient lighting. You don't put your lighting, and when you're backing your lighting, you're unable to see your analyzer, you're unable to see whatever work process you are doing or whatever processing you are doing. No, it should be in a way that you're able to see every area, and the lighting must be good, must be fluorescent bulb. You don't need to use your yellow 60 watt, 40 watt bulb in a laboratory. No, you should use a fluorescent bulb, a white light bulb, and that would help in lighting your laboratory properly. Your windows must be kept clean, as dirty windows need to be reported, and they should be arranged for cleaning immediately. So your windows, it is very important that your windows are kept clean. And this is not just because you want to keep your environment clean, it is also important for your safety, for your personnel safety, your team member safety, as well as the safety of your customers. So wall sockets should not be within reaching distance of any water. So water and wall sockets should not be at the same place. I visited the facility recently, a new facility, and the wall socket is just on top of the sink. No, that should not be. That should not be at all. Your wall socket should be a bit distant, at least +1 - 1 meter apart from your sink where water comes out. And all electric outlets must be earthened. They must be earthened so that they avoid electric shock to individuals, to laboratory personnel, or healthcare personnel. Work area. Your work area surface must be kept clean and uncluttered. Maintenance and repair work must be neatly finished off. Your sink must be kept clean. Equipment, chemical supplies, and tools that are not in use must be properly stored, and they should be put not in use and out of the laboratory space. When not in use, when your equipment are not in use, they should be taken out of the laboratory space. They should be kept properly stored somewhere where they do not cause obstruction to workflow or obstruction to way of passageway. They should not cause obstacle. Unneeded packagings and chemicals must be disposed of immediately to reduce hazard. Fire extinguishers and electrical control panels must be properly demarcated with the official sign. We know that our fire extinguishers, our electric control panels, they have their own signs, and these should be placed at every strategic locations in the laboratory, in your workspace, in your research facility, so they can be easily identified and reached to. So emergency numbers for firefighters should be posted next to the telephone. It is very important that emergency lines are kept close to where the telephone is for easy access. In case of emergencies, they can be reached immediately, and they should be updated regularly. In a case where the emergency line has been changed, they should be updated and documented adequately. All staff members should know the location of important keys needed for work, for analysis, for sample storage, for equipment storage. Important authorized personnel, they should know the location of all these keys, so that in case they want to visit, in case there is issue or there is hazard coming out from any storage room, any storage equipment, they can be easily reached by these personnel. Clutters must be cleared away, as these are continued parts of work procedure. So any objects, equipment that are in clusters, they should be decluttered immediately so that they ensure continued workflow. Storage facility must be kept neat and tidied. So your storage facility, where you keep your reagents, where you keep your samples, they should be kept very clean to avoid cross-contamination, to avoid contamination, and they should be kept and well stored at the appropriate temperature and pressure. Electrical power point switches and fittings must be in working order. This cannot be really overemphasized, because when you have a faulty electrical fitting, we know what they can do. They can easily cause fire accidents. And your power point must not be overloaded. Of course, your power point should not be overloaded. You don't need to use one extension for 10 machines. No, each machine should have their own power ports where they are plugged, and where this should be well demarcated and well earthened. Maintenance and repair work must always be neatly finished off. You do not keep exposed or naked wire when working. Immediately you expose them, they should be finished off immediately and not kept overnight or for a long period of time, so that they do not cause hazard or accidents. Your bathroom and toilets, the toilet bowls must be cleaned daily. Your toilet seats, everything, your flushing system must be in good working condition. Toilet papers for clients, for customers, for patients must be provided regularly. Even for your laboratory staff, for your healthcare personnel, there must be toilet paper. So in case they want to use the restroom, they have toilet paper or tissue to use at that point. Your hand washing basin must be kept clean. The taps, your soap dispenser must be filled regularly. In a case where you have your sink, everything, then you don't have soap for hand wash or a hand wash. It doesn't tell well of a good laboratory, and these are part of laboratory safeties that must be adhered to. Hot hair dryers or papers must be provided for drying of hand. It is very important that hot hair dryers are used to dry hand immediately after washing, so you do not go and infect yourself. Go and use a dirty towel or a dirty hand toilet paper to clean your hand, or even your handkerchief. No, your hand must be properly dried by hot hair dryers. Signs and notice. Safety signs and notice must be posted in all labs. We said that initially. The signs must be observed and they should be studied. They should be studied adequately. All signs must be clearly visible and should be adhered to. Obscure, faded, or damaged signs should or must be replaced as soon as possible. Exit sign, arrow, where applicable. For every facility, there is always an exit route, a first exit route, and emergency exit route. And this must have a sign: this way to exit, emergency exit, this way to exit, this way to enter, pull or push. This exit sign must be very legible. Flammable storage signs: no smoking, open to flame. These signs they are very important so that flames do not come in contact with flammable substances, or flammable substances do not come in contact with fire. So this flammable storage sign must be very visible. No smoking or open flame needed at a particular area. And these signs may be needed if flammable store is not located in the laboratory, and they are needed. And these signs may not also be needed when the flammable store are located within the laboratory, because they are always in the laboratory and they are always marked. Safety sign for fire blanket. There should be safety sign for fire blanket when you don't have your fire extinguisher. And for modernized laboratories or top class laboratories, they have both the fire blanket as well as your fire extinguisher. And the safety sign, they must be properly labeled. Safety sign for hand wash and shower sign. So hand wash, emergency hand wash, eye wash bottles. In case of spillage to the eye, there is an emergency. There should be an emergency eye wash location where individuals or laboratory personnel are able to reach at the quickest possible time where there is an accident. Signs for first aid. Of course, where your first aid is cleared, where your first aid is kept, there should be sign there stating that this is a first aid area. Your sign for fire extinguisher, 2 signs. The bottle must be labeled, or your fire extinguisher itself should be labeled, and also an arrow on the wall where it is being kept to show where the fire extinguisher is kept. So we should take that importantly. The waste bin, just as I said, the waste bin must be provided all through premises. And I said the waste bin they are color coded for different type of waste. And the content of the refuse bin must be removed daily. For a busy facility, for a busy laboratory, in a period of every 6 hours, they should be cleared immediately because of the volume of waste that is being generated. And this must be placed in designated or strategic areas for collection by your waste management, waste disposal management, or any other person who comes to clear up waste. The black inner plastic bag must be replaced regularly. Waste must be placed in designated containers, just as we said, in accordance to the color of waste basket. Earlier, we spoke about the color codes for waste basket: the black, the red, the yellow, the white, and they have serve specific purpose. The black being used for general waste, your yellow container or yellow bag being used for sharps. You have your sharp bag, yellow also. Then you have your red container being used for your laboratory waste, your gloves, your infectious waste. Then also we have the yellow. Some place use both red and yellow, or yellow for anatomical waste. So this must be followed and adhered to strictly. And these waste bins should not be overfilled so that it can be easily tied or easily carried by the waste disposal department. Storage and stacking. Do not stack or store any item in front of the door or passage. You know, we said that earlier, that every passage must be cleared from obstacle. It is necessary. Do not use windshield for storage of items. The inside of cabinets and desk drawers should always be neat and orderly. Our biosafety cabinets must always be kept clean, must always be orderly, and must always be disinfected regularly. Your racks, your shelf, your cupboard must be kept free of superflux materials. Your racks, your shelf, your cupboard must be kept free from materials that are superflux, that are not needed, especially from bottle containers that are not needed, or breakable containers. So avoid, in a case where you need to go pick up something from the cupboard, you do not mistakenly, push this bottle or breakable substance, so that they do not cause accidents in the laboratory. Your racks should be secured with adequate bracing. So your racks should always have side edges which are called bracing, so that they can hold any material or item that wants to fall off without your prior notice. All heavy items must be stored at the bottom of the shelf to ensure safer handling. Like your bottle, your chemical bottles, they should be kept at the bottom of any shelf so that they can be handled safely or safer when there is a spillage. All visitors are required to stay at the reception. This is for security purpose. The visitor should remain at the reception until he or she is collected by the person being visited or escorted. All visitors must be escorted by someone or the person who they come to visit, and the person must be an authorized personnel. Firearms should not be allowed at work. Of course, visitors coming into the laboratory should not be allowed to carry in firearm to the inside the laboratory because of security purpose. Note that if any visitor, whether medical or non-medical, are to enter the actual laboratory area, they must wear their lab coats. It is very compulsory and important that laboratory personnel, whether medical, laboratory personnel, non-laboratory personnel, the medical team, even the managing director, when coming into the laboratory, must wear his or her lab coat for their own protection. So this is how the biosafety looks like. This is your biosafety 1 and 2, and this is how your workspace should be well arranged. As you can see, you do not need to cover the bin. So your biosafety, for those of us that do not know how a biosafety cabinet looks like, this is a biosafety level 1 and level 2. So on the net, you see how a laboratory is kept clean. You see how the workplace space, you can see the signs, the hazard sign. You can see even the disposable container, you see the signs there, and you see how they are all well neatly arranged. So this is part of housekeeping for optimal laboratory safety. So signs and notice. So this picture is not so clear, but we can see the sign on top of each location stating where materials are kept, where you should follow, where you should not pass. And this is how you should keep your laboratory signed. They should have signs, they should have signs for specific locations or specific items for safety reasons. Thank you. So module 5, I don't know if any of us can hear me or if I need to repeat anything from module 4. We'll move to module 5.
Just continue with module 5.
You can hear you, sir.
I have a question on module 4.
Please,
Okay,
just
okay,
continue with
questions will
module 4.
come.
Module,
Yeah,
continue with module 5. When you are
yeah,
done, you
questions will
ask your
come in at
question.
the end of our class. Questions. So you just write down your questions, jot them down, then we would have them at the end of the class. So module 5, we have GCP and GLP. Who can give us the meaning of GCP or GLP? Anybody with an idea? Let's just engage ourselves a little bit.
GLP.
GLP is good laboratory practice.
What about GCP? GCP, anyone? Okay, so now we would understand what GCP and GLP is as regards to safety. GCP is called good clinical practice and GLP good laboratory practice. So combination of them goods gives us GCLP, a good clinical laboratory practice. And this describes the standards to be followed by laboratories that perform analysis or evaluation of clinical trial samples. And these people who perform clinical trial samples are usually laboratory, research laboratories. So this good laboratory practice is a standard that must be followed by laboratories, medical laboratory, research facilities, research laboratories. And the principle should be followed by all laboratories involved in analyzing human sample, routine sample, or research sample. And from these samples may range from clinical trial to ensure that work is reliable, ethics are followed, and can accurately be used to support the finding of trial. So good clinical practice are all the standards and acceptable practice by healthcare facility to ensure patient satisfaction, quality outcome, as well as safety of the patient and healthcare providers. So the good clinical practice and the good laboratory practice are a mesh of standards that must be followed by laboratory to ensure that patients are satisfied, to ensure that your samples are well analyzed, and the outcome that comes out from your processing of your sample must be of quality. And also they ensure safety of the healthcare personnel, you as a laboratory personnel, and the patient or your client in general and totality. So one of the good laboratory practice or good clinical practice, number one rule is handle whole specimen as if they are infectious. Your father sample, your mother sample, whichever sample, you must handle them as potential hazard because you do not know who is the owner of the sample at that point in time. I have a story. That was my friend that got herself during one of my postings then as an intern. She got herself infected with Lassa sample unknowingly to her. This was her friend's sample. She was working without gloves and she had a cut. She was trying to run PCV on the sample. She was just running PCV because she wanted to just help her friend run a full blood count that day. So while she was sealing the capillary tube, the thing pricked her. But because it was her friend, she felt, okay, this is my friend's sample. There was no need. There was no need. All she did was just check herself for viral screening, HIV, hepatitis B and C, and syphilis, and they were free. So she felt very safe. Not after about 4 or 5 days, she came down with illness, and we discovered that she had been infected with Lassa, even that her friend unknowingly to her. So you must handle all specimen as potential hazard, as if they are infectious. You must wear your lab coat, you must wear your hand glove, you must always kit up properly with your PPE to ensure that when you want to handle any sample, it is very important not to eat in the laboratory. Do not eat in the laboratory for any reason. When you want to eat, when you want to drink water, please step out from your working chair, go and take your water, go and eat your food, and come back. You must not eat in the laboratory. All staff members must be trained in safe handling of infectious material, which is very important. laboratory staffs, laboratory personnel, authorized personnel must be trained on how to handle infectious material. It is very important not to go into the laboratory barefooted. You must always wear a cover shoe, or into the laboratory environment, into the healthcare space. You must not go in barefooted. Do not store food or drink in the laboratory fridge or in the laboratory used for storing drug vaccines or reagents or a healthcare reagent, laboratory reagent. You do not store food and drink where you store your samples. You should not, for cross-contamination, and it is very dangerous to your health because these are areas where potential infectious organisms are. And where you go and store when you go and store your food or drink there, you're exposing yourself to danger. It is not advisable to pipette with mouth. You don't pipette with your mouth. Those of us that like sucking, you want to pipette, you want to tell us how fast, how accurate you are in pipetting, your pipetting skills. Do not, for whatsoever reason, pipette. Because whatever you are pipetting, you do not know what it is. So it is very important for your safety that you do not pipette with mouth. And this is part of good clinical laboratory practice. Do not place finger, pencils or pen or any other object inside your mouth. Anything that is in the laboratory. Please, for God's sake, for those of us that like chewing the back of our cover, the cover of our biro when writing, please, when you're in the laboratory, desist from it. Even your finger, you should not chew your finger or you should not put them in your mouth because these are routes in which infection can occur. Defrost, clean, and decontaminate refrigerators or freezer regularly to prevent infectious buildup. It is very important that routinely, I think every monthly, it is very important that you decontaminate your refrigerators and freezers so that we avoid buildup of infectious materials. And keep all refrigerated materials well labeled. They have to be well labeled. Take care not to create aerosols in any procedure. By all means, we should always try and avoid aerosols. When whether you're opening a specimen, cap, or streaking a plague, you should take very good care not to create aerosols by yourself because the minimal the aerosols, the better the safety of the laboratory personnel and other team members. To avoid the formation of aerosols when toppling, carefully remove the cap of the vacuum tube while pointing them away from your face. When you want to open any reagent or cap of any specimen container and the likes, you don't have to bring them to your mouth or you bring them downward close to your face. No, you have to take them away from your face and carefully open them, remove the cap, the rubber cap, so that they do not create aerosols that you can easily breathe in. Keep work areas, bench surfaces, and floor free of chemical contamination, tripping hazard, and sharp hazard to help prevent laboratory accidents. So it is very important that we keep our benches, our work area, and even the floor free from chemicals, from sharp objects, so that we prevent laboratory hazard and accidents. Because a good laboratory must not have sharp. You shouldn't have your needle on the lying carelessly on your workspace. No, because you do not know what will happen. Somebody can just go and hit it before you know it causes a cut. No, that's very careless. You have to clean all spill immediately. For every spill, you first have to disinfect before you clean. You have to clean them immediately, and this should be done immediately. Inoculate and handle cultures of highly virulent material in a biological safety cabinet. So when handling, for those of us that work in microbiology facilities, when handling high virulent material, materials that are high risk materials, we must handle them or process them in a biological safety cabinet, and preferably from level 2, level 3, from level 2 upwards are the best used biological safety cabinets to handle such materials. Laboratory coats are not to be worn outside of the designated laboratory areas, and this includes going to the restroom. You should not, for those of us that cultivate the habit of wearing our laboratory coats or our lab coats outside just to show people, to showcase yourself, it should not be so. You should not do that. They should not be worn outside the laboratory space and laboratory designated areas. Wash your hands regularly with antiseptic soap containing antibacterial agents, and especially before leaving the laboratory. When you're going home, when you're going for tea or lunch break, or when you're going to the toilet, you must wash your hand regularly. At all points when you're leaving the laboratory facility, you must wash your hand. Keep the disinfectant soap readily available. Of course, you have to keep your disinfectant soap close to the wash basin for easy access for use. Remove your gloves and discard them into medical waste bin. Waste bin. You have to remove your glove. There are ways in which you remove your glove. Not that you remove one and you now use your bare hand to remove the second one. No, there are ways in which we should remove our glove. There are demonstrations, and that will be shared with us as time goes on. Remove your lab coat and hang up. You have to separate where you keep dirty used lab coats from neat lab coats. You need to remove them. You don't just remove them and keep them on the bench or on your chair where you sit for working. You must hang them appropriately on the designated environments. We'll open this. The next safety rule talks about how you wash your hand. The first thing to do is to open the tap and you wet your hand. You apply soap to your hand, and later as well. During the COVID-19 period, I think this was very common then. We're now being taught on how to wash our hands. How many of us still remember that procedure? How many of us still remember and still practice that today?
I still remember the procedure.
Okay, cool. So this is the same procedure when working in the facility. It took us COVID for us to realize how to wash our hand. Even a few of us laboratory staff, it took COVID for us to actually realize how to wash our hand. So there is a correct procedure, and that procedure must be followed regularly. So the next procedure is talked about how to wash your hand. Open the tap, wet your hand, apply soap and leather well. Wash your hand thoroughly for 20 to 30 seconds. Rinse your hand under running water. That is why it is very important to have running water, not the one that you have to fetch water from the basin first, then your hand is still wet with this thing, with soap and latter. You now still use that latter hand to go and carry water from inside the drum of water. No, you have to use running water at all time, running water. You use paper towel to dry your hand, and in the case where you don't have paper toweling, you use hand dryer, just as we stated earlier. And if the tap is not an able tap, use the paper towel to turn off the tap so you do not reinfect your hand, and then you discard the paper towel into a medical waste container. So, cleanliness of bench tops and sink. Bench top and sink in the laboratories and bleeding room must be decontaminated at least once a day. In fact, for any facility I visit, I ensure that my bench must be cleaned in the morning and in the afternoon. It must be cleaned in the morning and in the afternoon. And in the evening, for the person on night duty, it must be cleaned. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. So also the contamination should occur immediately when there is any visible spill. When there is any visible spill, it must be cleaned. You don't allow the spill to remain there on the bench. It should be cleaned immediately. You should use a suitable disinfectant. And I said the most common disinfectant that I use in the laboratory is the 1% hypochlorite. Wear protective clothing when carrying out the above. Of course, when you want to carry out disinfection, when you want to disinfect your laboratory space, the bench and the sink, the bench top and sink, you must wear your glove, you must wear your lab coat, and you must sign off your daily bench and sink decontamination worksheet. So for laboratories, who have this laboratory decontamination worksheets. You must always sign off, and it is very important and advisable that every laboratory have this daily bench decontamination worksheet. Doesn't just include your bench, must include even equipment decontamination, must include environmental decontamination. This must be signed on regularly. So other types of cleaning for good laboratory safety practice. Personal phones are not allowed in the laboratory due to possibility of transmission of infection. You can have a phone designated in the laboratory, a telephone or a landline, where even families can reach you in case of emergency. Personal phones should be used in clean environment outside the laboratory workspace. Wipe down the outside of fridge and freezer with disinfectants, including the handles of your fridge and freezer, and even your laboratory door. You must always wipe them clean and disinfect regularly. Any tough stain should be removed with the appropriate disinfectants, and do not use cleaning solution containing ammonia, because ammonia gets to wear and tear bench surfaces. They cause corrosion. So note that improper collection, transportation, and handling of specimen in the laboratory carries a very high risk of infection to the personnel involved. For those of us that get to transport specimen, so it is very important for us to collect our sample properly, transport them. When you see your container leaking, when you are seeing a spillage, it must be handled carefully so that to avoid risk of infection to even yourself and to the laboratory team members. Samples handling and transportation. It is important that all personnel handling samples specimen must be vaccinated of hepatitis B, and this must be recorded. For most facilities, they must, before you enter the facility, you have to do hepatitis B vaccination test so that they know your immune level. And if you are not vaccinated, they will give you vaccine. So it is very important that you get vaccinated against hepatitis B, and this must be recorded and tested to confirm immunity. All specimens pose a potential danger, and they must be handled with caution. We said that initially that you should treat all specimens as potential hazard. Always wear your laboratory coat when handling specimen, including aliquoting of samples. Place all specimens to plastic sealable bags. Ensure the specimen are not in direct contact with ice packs unless stated otherwise. And transport the specimen to the laboratory as soon as possible. So opening packages. Personnel who receive an open package should be aware of the potential health hazard and should be trained on how to adopt standard precautions, particularly when dealing with broken or leaked container. So it is very important that personnel that handle unpacked specimen should be trained on how to handle them carefully in case when they are dealing with broken or leaked containers. Primary specimen container should be opened in a biological safety cabinet, and this cabinet should be disinfected where possible or immediately. 24 hours urine handling. 24 hours urine should be collected into plastic bottle with a handle and placed in the urine bottle in an upright position when being transported. And for histology or cytology samples, it is important that you seal these buckets, the specimen container, with paraffin to avoid leakage of your liquid for your preservative liquid, your formaldehyde. You place smaller containers in a single bag, but for larger containers, you place them in a double bag, and you must seal immediately. Make sure all cytology containers are securely taped out before transport. Ensure they are taped out, they are sealed adequately with paraffin wax, and you place the request form separately from the specimen bag. So it is very important that you place your request form separately from your specimen. For most of us that work in the laboratory, in government facilities, We'll see a patient coming with sample and the request form. They will place the sample on top of the patient request form and come and hand it over to you. And you too, you will still collect it. You will not use hand glove to collect the sample and still use your hand to collect the request form. Who is deceiving who? It is very important that they are kept separately. They are kept, samples should be handled separately from the request form. Safety specifications for cooler or bag. So the specification, it must not be leak proof. It should be resistant to mechanical stress and temperature change. They should have a lid that can be fixed, a fixed lid during transportation. They should be placed upright in a fixed lid. They should have a disposable lining to contain leaking or broken sample. So every leak-proof cooler or container must have a disposable lining. You have to put a disposable lining first before you put in your sample or container. So in case there is leakage, that lining can be easily removed and replaced with another lining. They should be washable. So your cooler bag for sample should be washable and be able to withstand chemical sterilization, because it is very important that they are sterilized regularly. And they must be able to contain ice packs for maintaining temperatures between 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, with or without direct contact with the sample. So it is very important that you use good coolers or containers or bag that are able to contain ice pack. You know, ice pack are ice. And if you don't use a good bag or box to bag your sample, you see that it begins to affect the box itself and you can collapse the box. But a box that is that can be able to withstand the temperature of 8 to 10 degrees and not get wet in the process is very suitable for use when transporting your sample. Handling of sample. The sample reception areas. For laboratories that receive large number of specimens, a designated area should be kept for that purpose. Designated area for sample receiving must be kept separate from sample collection, so that to avoid confusion, to avoid spillage, and to avoid mismanagement of sample. All safety measures applicable to the laboratory must be adhered to in the space and the department. It is very important to adhere to all safety measures in the laboratory, especially in the pre-analytical phase. We all know that the pre-analytical phase is the major phase of any laboratory testing, and anything that goes wrong in the pre-analytical phase affects every other phase of the laboratory, including the analytical and the post-analytical performance. Histology sample. Even in formalin is an excellent disinfectant. All histology specimen must be treated as potentially infectious. So even though that you use formalin or formaldehyde in preserving your sample, you should treat all histology specimen as potential hazardous. Dense or large tissue may resist penetration by formalin for considerable time. Where formalin has not reached, it cannot be regarded as sterile. So for large tissue, the volume of formalin should be increased and they should be kept for a longer period of time so that they can be preserved and sterile at the same time. So large sample, when you have large tissue, you should use a large amount of formalin for preservation and also sterility. Long tissue may not adequately be penetrated by fixative due to trapped residual air. So we should all take note that the long tissue, it traps air. So in that case, that trapped air can contain the liquid, which may not enable it to penetrate in depth inside the tissue. So it's very important we take note of that when fixing, because if you do not take note, when it's unable to enter inside, they are potentially hazardous. And when you handle them carelessly, you risk the chance of being infected. Fresh tissues and tissue liquid. When fresh tissues and tissue liquid are sometimes received, such sample must be, it is obvious that that sample should be treated as potentially infectious. Microorganisms may be trapped in totally impregnable biological areas and tissues, which are later cut open during trimming. So it's very important that you treat every sample that comes into the histology department as potentially hazardous, because you cannot tell whether it has been totally sterilized or disinfected. Also note that not all viruses are susceptible to formalin. An example of them are neurotropic viruses that are found in the brain tissue. So that is why it is very important that you treat all tissues as potentially hazardous. If a tissue specimen arrives in the laboratory without any fixative or in saline, and there is no test requested, drain the fluid. If a tissue specimen arrives in the laboratory without any fixative and there is no test requested on the form, it is important that the doctor is called to establish what test is required. So for every tissue, we do not treat histology tissue as blood sample, where you just reject for rejection criteria because there was no form attached or thereabouts. You have to treat them. Tissues are one, and because of the pain it takes to get tissue, it is important that you reach out to the doctor to understand the kind of test that sample is undergoing. And if enough formalin is not added, it is important that you discard the formalin that has been kept and fill with a fresh formalin. Histology specimen must be dissected in a fume hood where formalin fume are extracted by extractor fan. So we know how offensive formalin can be. They irritate your eyes, they cause real irritation of the skin, and as such, when their histology specimen are being dissected, they should be dissected in a fume hood because of the kind of hazard, air pollution that formalin causes. And this fume hood must contain extractor fan so that it can extract the fumes that comes out from the formalin and replace with clean air. Sample leakage. It's very important to empty the bag onto the workbench. Do not use your hand, use a glove. Do not put your hand into the specimen bag because you do not know if the sample leakage is caused by a broken glass or a broken specimen container, which can injure you. You have to close the specimen lid tightly if possible. After you empty the bag, you have to empty it on the workbench and do not put your hand inside. Then you close it tightly if it is possible. If the leakage is due to improper closing of the specimen container, so you close tightly, then you wipe the container well with disinfectant. You have to wipe it clean with disinfectant and you allow the container to dry. Then you also fill an incident report stating that the sample leaked before it gets to the laboratory. You fill an incident report because the volume of sample can affect the quality of result that is being provided. Broken samples. Remove any broken specimen by using a forceps from the specimen bag. So when you empty the bag on the workbench and you sight or notice that it was broken, it is important, or it is very advisable to use forceps to pick out or remove the broken specimen from the specimen bag. Wipe the unbroken specimen with a chemical disinfectant. You wipe them clean. Do not handle any broken specimen with gloved or bare hand. Just as we said initially, it is very important that you do not handle broken specimen with a glove or bare hand because of cuts. Wrap the specimen bag with the broken sample in paper towel and discard properly into a medical waste. Also, you fill an incident report. Breakage in centrifuge. We always have breakage in centrifuge when centrifuging at a very high revolution. So it's very important that you wear your laboratory coats, your glove and mask when you're approaching a working centrifuge because of aerosols. It is very important to wear your mask. Once the centrifuge has stopped, you allow it to stand with the lid closed for about 5 minutes. So you don't just open immediately. You don't open the centrifuge immediately. You allow it to wait. You wait for about 5 minutes and allow the aerosol to settle. Then you place a paper towel next to the centrifuge so that you can use to drain the spillage. Then remove the broken glass with forceps and drop in a sharp container, or place it onto a layer of paper onto the layer of paper of the paper towel so that you can discard into a medical waste. Do not handle broken glass with gloved hands. We said that initially. Wash the contaminated bucket in a fresh solution of chemical, e.g. hypochlorite or chlorine. You wash your centrifuge bucket so that to remove the sample or to remove the spillage from the body. And aside from the fact that it prevents infection, it is not really advisable that your centrifuge contains blood stain. It's an eyesore and it's not good. It's not good at all. When you are working and you open your centrifuge and the next thing you are seeing blood spillage everywhere. No, you don't do that. It's not really advisable and it's not healthy. It doesn't tell well of a good laboratory. Swab the inside of the centrifuge, including the lid, with chemical disinfectant. Allow the centrifuge and bucket to stand for at least 30 minutes to allow the chemical disinfectant take effect. So you allow the centrifuge, when you apply your disinfectant, you leave for about 30 minutes. Then you wrap your broken piece of glass that you kept on the table or on the paper towel. You wrap and seal with tape. If you're not going to be discarding into the sharp container, you wrap it very well and you seal with tape so that it can be properly discarded into the medical waste. And you discard into the medical waste and also fill an incident report. Collecting specimen from patients in isolation. Remember, we're talking about laboratory safety, laboratory healthcare safety. So one of the ways in which we keep ourselves safe, so we ensure safety of ourselves as laboratory personnel, is one want to collect sample from a patient who is a potential hazard and who is in isolation. So it is very important that you must wear your personal protective equipment. You must be fully kitted, just as the case we had during COVID-19, our fully kit. COVID-19 really exposed a lot to us about laboratory safety. And since then, a lot of us are taking laboratory safety very important. So when you want to collect sample from somebody in isolation, you must wear your complete personal protective equipment. Under no circumstances may you use container bag, reuse container bag. It is not advisable to reuse by washing or disinfecting container bag for reuse. It is not advisable at all. Use of pipette and pipetting aid. Remember, these are part of good laboratory practice to ensure quality results, patient satisfaction. So it's very important that your a good pipette aid must be used, like your ball pipette. Pipetting by mouth, it is highly prohibited. All pipettes should have cotton plug to reduce contamination of pipetting device. For the new generation type of pipettes, the pipette tips are usually come with pipette filters that helps prevent it from transmitting contamination from the pipette tips to the pipette itself. So for those of us that cannot afford those kind of sophisticated pipettes, you must always use this cotton plug, to always attach it to the tip of the pipette to pick your pipette tips so that to avoid contamination of the pipetting device. Air should never be blown through a liquid containing infectious agents. We all know that to reduce accidents. Infectious material should not be mixed by alternation, suction, or expulsion through a pipette. So it is not advisable to suction infectious material through pipettes. It is not advisable. It is not advisable. Liquid should not be forcibly expelled from pipettes. When you are pipetting and you see liquid, you still see some droplets of liquid, then you start hitting it so that they come outside. No, it is not advisable, because the more you are doing that, the more you are transmitting aerosols into the environment. It is always good to mark your pipettes. Mark-to-mark pipettes are preferable, so that you know the level or limits that you do not get to exceed, as they do not require expulsion of the last drop. So it is very important to use calibrated pipettes that are marked. This is important so that you do not get to remove every last drop of liquid that is in the pipette tube, so that it will avoid all those forced expellation of liquid. So it's very important to use pipettes that are calibrated and that are marked, so that you know where to stop and you don't get to use or expel the last drop of liquid. And also for accuracy purpose, it's very important. Contaminated pipettes should be completely submerged in a suitable disinfectant contained in an unbreakable container. So it's very important that you submerge, or you put your contaminated pipette inside disinfectant, your hypochlorites. After a while, they should be left there for a long period of time before they are disposed, so that every infectious agent can be disinfected. A discard container for pipettes should always be placed within biological safety cabinets, not outside. So it's very important when pipetting, it's very important that you place your discard container close to your workspace, so that as you are pipetting, when you want to discard, you don't just bring the pipette and the pipette tube outside the biosafety cabinet. You just directly dispel the pipette tips inside the discard container. Syringe fitted with hypodermic needles must not be used for pipetting. So it is not advisable to use pipettes. I know most of our laboratories, when we do not have pipettes, we will now go and pick up syringe. We'll go and pick up syringe to calculate our pipette, to pipette our liquid or pipette our normal saline when we want to use. No, it is not advisable to use a syringe for pipetting. Device for opening septum capped bottles is to be used, and avoid the use of hypodermic needles for opening bottles that are capped. It is very important that you do not use needles or syringe to open them. To avoid dispersion of infectious materials dropped from a pipette, an absorbent material should be placed on the working surface. So while working in your working environment, in your biosafety cabinet, and you want to expel excess liquid, instead of forcibly dispelling, it's always important that you use an absorbent material. You use a cotton wool so that it drains the liquid itself, rather than forcibly expelling the liquid. We've said a lot today. In our next class, we are going to be continuing from Module 6 and 7. Thank you, and thank you so good. Thank you. My name is Ikechukwu once again for Pegisol. Any question?